different things, and you've broadcast with the Stampede, all of these different things. So how do they all mesh together with your life as a writer?
You know, my very first book was a book called The Cowboy Kid, which was written for kind of those grade 4 to 7-ish age group. And in it, it's about rodeo. It's about the Calgary Stampede, and the big pivotal scene takes place at this tunnel. It has to run under the track and come up in the infield at the Calgary Stampede. And there's still a tunnel there, but it's a different one now. But the old one was kind of a cool one, and that's where this scene took place. So I think initially, you know, the old story, people say you should write what you know. And it turned out that I know something about the sport of rodeo from my background as a very bad competitor, as a very average rodeo clown, and hopefully as a fairly decent rodeo announcer. So I decided to use some of that as the background for some of those early books. My first 3 books were the rodeo trilogy. And so I used that rodeo background. Rodeo has popped up in probably, out of those 27 books you referenced, probably 8 or 10 of them at least, including even the Cullen and Cobb mysteries. There are references to the Calgary Stampede and so on. So that's always come back. The rodeo stuff has come back to be a part of the background of what I do.
So you mentioned Cullen and Cobb, which is kind of why we're here tonight, and you started rather late writing mysteries. So what was kind of the genesis of Cullen and
Cobb? As I said, I grew up around mysteries. My dad read the Perry Mason books, and I started on Perry Mason, and then I graduated to Nero Wolfe, and eventually, but I'd always read Sherlock Holmes and the classics and all of that, of the mysteries. And I love that genre. I probably love mysteries more than any other book kind, or any kind of book. And always wanted to write. And I was afraid to. Because if it's the thing you want to do most, what happens if you fail? And so there's a very simple way not to fail. Don't try. And so for many, many years, I didn't try. But I still had that thing eating away at me. Why don't you write a mystery? And in about 2013, 14-ish, I had this idea for a mystery. And I started playing with it, and it took me a really, really long time. And eventually I got it written, and I called it Serpent's Rising, but I didn't even know if I was going to do anything with it. But I was glad that I'd actually finished the mystery. And I went back and I read it, and I thought, you know, I don't mind this. This might work. And so I sent it to my agent, who in turn sent it to a publisher. And that publisher, instead of, you know, the 12 rejection letters that you get before a publisher finally accepts the book, that publisher jumped on it right away. And I was excited about that. It was called Serpent's Rising. And I thought, okay, that's it. I've fulfilled my dream. I've written my mystery. I can relax, pump out a few more kids' books and maybe some other stuff, and we'll have some fun with it. And then the publisher came back to me and said, you know, we like this well enough that we'll offer you a contract for books 2, 3, and 4 if you turn it into a series. And talking about those good things about that was one of them right there. And so we have now finished the 4th book in the series, and that's kind of how it came about. Now, of course, people wonder if there's going to be a 5th book. Well, we're plugging away on that. Unfortunately, a publisher called Dundurn Books in Toronto has changed ownership. Anytime there's an ownership change, things sometimes change. And so right now, we're kind of my agent is in negotiation with them as to whether or not there will be a 5th book. I'm hoping there might be, but I can't say that for sure. I don't honestly. But yeah, it took me a long time to write those books, but now I feel like it's one of the things that I'm proudest of, quite honestly, is the Cullen and Cobb mystery.
Well, I know I've got a certain affinity for him, being a journalist, being one of the characters. So that leads me to something I've been curious about for a while, which is either of the characters, is that you? Or a part of you? Or are you with, any of your other books?
What I want to say in answer to that question is no. What I have to say, if I'm being honest, to answer that question is, there's probably a part of me in a number of characters in my books over the years. Some people have said, and Judy and I had this conversation a few days ago about Adam Cullen, who of course is the journalist in the Cullen and Cobb mysteries. And people have said to me, when I read these books, and of course it's a first person telling of the story by Adam Cullen, and people say to me, I hear your voice, and I see you as Adam Cullen or Adam Cullen as you. And certainly there are elements about him. Both of us have a great affinity for Canadian music, and that's kind of worked its way into the books, and he loves Canadian music and is kind of an expert on the topic. Both of us love baseball, wanted to be professional baseball players. Neither one of us made it. And there are things about him. There are other things about him that are probably not me, but certainly there are elements of me, I think, and probably even in Cobb, there might be one or two things that, he drives a Jeep Cherokee. I've got a Jeep Cherokee, so there's all these little funny little things that do work themselves in. And yeah, I think I would be lying if I said there aren't elements of me that probably at least color the characters in some of the books.
What about your other books?
A book that I'm really proud of, and I don't think we have any here tonight, but I think it's one of my best books of the kids' book series, and it's called Last Sam's Cage. And Last Sam's Cage is a story about a runaway kid. He's a young offender, and he winds up living at the Calgary Zoo. And while he's living at the Calgary Zoo, he meets an old man who's been coming to the Calgary Zoo every single day for 32 years. And this young offender, who's pretty good at breaking into people's homes, thinks that's pretty weird. And the old man, when he comes to the Calgary Zoo, all he does is he sits by the playground and watches kids play. He doesn't approach them. He doesn't bother them. He doesn't even talk to them. He just watches. But the kid thinks that's still kind of weird. And so he decides he's going to break into the old man's house and find out what's going on. See if he can find out something about this guy. And he does. He breaks into the old man's house, and he discovers that the old man is carrying with him a terrible and tragic secret from when he was a boy himself. And without trying to let out too much of the bag here, but I don't have the books here anyway, but when I was a kid, I grew up in Ridgeland, in Calgary, part of the time. And Barb and I were having this conversation the other day, and
It was a cheery conversation about serial killers.
Yeah, it was. But what happened was, there was a family lived across the street from me, and they had one of their children was my age, and we played together when we were kids, and we didn't live very far from the Calgary Zoo, and that was kind of our playground. And all of us kids went to the zoo and played, except him. His family would not allow him to go to the Calgary Zoo, and I said to my mom one time, I said, "Mom, why can't Grant? Why do you think his mom won't let him come to the Calgary Zoo and with us guys when we're going over there to play all of our games and whatever we're doing?" She didn't tell me right away, but eventually she told me that there had been a murder in that family. It's a very famous murder in Calgary history. It took place in 1946. It was the murder of Donnie Goss, who was 6 years old. He was murdered by a pedophile who had already murdered another boy in Vancouver. And, when something like that happens, and it was a huge moment in Calgary history, because this little boy disappeared from the Calgary Zoo. It's where he and his older brother were playing. And this little boy disappeared, and he wasn't found for a couple of days. And he was found in the bushes at the Calgary Zoo and murdered brutally. And of course, there was a great search for the killer, and eventually the killer was caught, and in fact put to death, one of the final capital murder, capital punishment cases in Canadian history. And it gripped us, and at that time Calgary was a very small city, it totally gripped the city. In fact, I was telling Barb, there was an old baseball park there called Buffalo Stadium in Calgary, where the semi-pro ball players play. And when the killer was caught and the announcement was made, they actually stopped the ball game in the middle of the ball game and made an announcement to the crowd. That because everybody was so caught up in this horrible moment in Canadian history, in Calgary history. Well, I grew up with that because there's my neighbors, and it was them. And you hear that story, and it's in you, and it's part of you, and it's part of my growing up. And years later, when I went to write Last Sam's Cage, that was in the back of my mind. And while Last Sam's Cage is not that story, it's very much inspired by that story. So I don't even remember, Rob, what the question was. But anyway, there you are. That's one of the stories I wanted to